Hello everybody, and welcome to the special Halloween edition of Retro Gamer Ranting. Twitch is unavailable at the moment. He's currently been disposed of. I'll be your host for today, Igor. The master has let me out of the cage to come and talk to you about a wonderful little game called Castlevania. The first one on the NES, so I guess you can call this a retrospective. At least that's what Twitch would say if he was still here. Castlevania was one of the most influential horror genre games of its time. It brought together many marvelous monsters into one package that many people still consider one of the best games on the NES. It was one of those... Wait, how did you get out of your cage? No, what are you...
Stay down, you hunchback piece of... Oh, crap. He's recording. He started the show without me? I figured so much. Hi, everyone. It's okay. Stay calm. This is Twitch. Everything's alright. He just had me locked up in the basement. Could someone please clean this up? Yeah, thanks. Just watch his... Oh, okay. Jeez. It's going to be impossible to get that stain off the carpet. You know that? The shovels are in the shed. Yeah. You'll be able to find it. It's right in the front there. Oh, man. Anyway, welcome to the special Halloween edition of Retro Gamer Ranting. From the hearing I heard down in the basement, Igor decided he wanted to start the show without me. Apparently he's heard of me before, which is weird because no one has. So let's pick up where our unwanted friend left off before I beat him in the head with a blunt object. Castlevania on the NES. What can I say about it that hasn't been? I've kind of struggled with that a bit. It's sort of one of those things where I didn't want to start saying stuff that everyone's heard before when it comes to Castlevania. It's sort of one of those games like Mario and Metroid, Zelda and Mega Man, where when people start talking about it, they sort of say the same things. It had good graphics. It basically had tight controls, almost too tight, and made it a completely different platforming experience compared to games like Super Mario Brothers and Metroid. It sort of fell into the whole category of more along the lines of Ninja Gaiden and Mega Man, control-wise and I suppose experience-wise. When you got hit, you usually got stopped for a few seconds. You would fall backward and you'd blink and you'd lose control of your character, and that was kind of a frustrating thing. It sort of added that whole element where you had to watch your step a little bit more than other games, because you would fall into a pit if you got hit, or end up losing precious time because you'd get hit by an enemy and therefore get stuck in this trap and end up dying. And so basically it was the kind of control scheme that, well, made it easy for a player to die quite often. But people who played Castlevania a lot got the hang of it, and of course, while they're not going to praise it control-wise, they will, of course, sing its praises action-wise. The enemies were relentless in this game. They came from all sides of the screen, top, bottom, left, right, whatever. There were traps, there were boss fights, and as you worked your way through Dracula's castle, it just got harder, more complex, more complicated, more action, more adventure than you can ever imagine. Everyone knows about the sub-weapons, everyone knows about the control, but what is it that I can say that is a little bit different than everyone else? Well, of course, I haven't heard everyone else, so maybe I am repeating myself a bit more, but I'm going to at least try. One of the things I thought about when I was going back and playing some Castlevania to bring back some good old memories was Universal Studios monsters. Yeah, kind of weird, huh? Well, I'm talking about the old classic monsters, the black and white days. Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, the Mummy, all of those. And I kind of see Castlevania as a tribute to all those monsters, as a tribute to those kind of monsters, those classic ones, the ones that truly frightened us for the first time back in the day. Now, of course, I wasn't around for those movies, but if you want to respect these monsters, you have to go back and watch the old black and white Dracula, the old black and white Dr. Frankenstein movies, because they are truly the way everyone depicts these monsters today. Well, except for Dracula. Unfortunately, vampires have just gotten a lot more sissier as of late. Anyway, I digress. Don't get me started on that. One of the things that people loved about those movies is every now and then you would see a crossover. You would see Dr. Frankenstein's monster cross over to a Dracula movie, or Frankenstein versus the Wolfman, or there'd be the Mummy or something like that. And it always kind of felt like people were getting more for their money in those cases. They were getting more monsters. It wasn't just a movie about one monster, it was a movie about multiple monsters. That added suspense, it added the terror to it. And I kind of see Castlevania as a tribute to those old-time movies. You have Dracula, you have Frankenstein's monster, you have mummies, you have all those old-time classic monsters all thrown in there. Heck, you even have to fight Medusa, which, that's more, I don't know, Greek mythology or something like that. So, hey, but it's still fun. Heck, you go on and fight death itself. And that's what made it so interesting, is it's one of those games where it made you feel like you were getting more for your money. Because not only were you fighting Dracula, where a lot of developers back in the day would have just made Dracula the final boss and made a bunch of weird, goofy bad guys that led up to him that had absolutely nothing to do with Dracula, and that would have been it. But no, Castlevania had everyone else too. You weren't just fighting Dracula, you were fighting Frankenstein, you were fighting the Mummy, you were fighting all those little creatures in between. Each new screen brought on new bad guys, new monsters that just horrified you. Horrified you on an 8-bit game. Which brings me to my next point. Castlevania was the first real horror video game, horror-themed video game, on the NES. And it was, too. Nothing really came before it. It had atmosphere. It had exquisitely looking monsters trying to rip your head off from all different angles. It had zombies trying to reach up from the grave. It had weird ghost skeletons trying to throw bones at you, which, you'd think after a while they'd run out of bones to throw at you. It had the oddest thing of all, little Igors that would jump around and try humping your leg. Okay, so not everything made sense, but it had everything. And it was something that was never done before. It had that kind of horror genre. And there really wasn't a lot of horror genre games on the NES. I mean, there were, but if you want to count those movie tie-ins, A Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th, which were horrible, then I guess so. Yeah, there was also Fester's Quest, and I'm sure there are a bunch of other ones I'm forgetting right now. But Castlevania was the one that basically started it all. It sort of set the standard. And for the most part, if it wasn't for Castlevania, you wouldn't have horror video games today. You wouldn't have your Resident Evil. You wouldn't have your Silent Hill. You wouldn't have your Fear. Heck, you might not even have your Doom, which that was one of the first real games that scared the bejesus out of me. And yes, playing Castlevania games now ain't really about the horror factor or the shock factor. Yeah, there's probably more gore in it now, and the creatures are more detailed, and now it's more of Castlevania meets Metroid, where you level up your character and all the good stuff. So it's sort of gotten away from its roots a lot. The most recent incarnation is more like God of War, from what I hear. I haven't played it myself, so a lot of hardcore Castlevania fans weren't too happy about that. But in general, it all sort of stemmed from there. They were putting these horrific creatures in a video game. Yeah, there wasn't blood, but there was definitely death in there. Literally, one of the bosses was death. You had zombies, you had these werewolf dogs that were jumping at you, you had giant bats, you had huge eagles that were somehow barneyed you. They threw every kind of monster they could think of in there. It's literally the kitchen sink. But you know what? It worked. And yes, it was hard. Yes, it was frustrating. But you got your money's worth. You wanted to play on. You wanted to learn the controls because you wanted to see what the next screen brought you. What kind of horrific entity was going to try and attack you? Would you be able to survive the traps of Castle Dracula? Would you be able to get to Dracula at all? Yeah, I will admit, it was a pretty hard game. I don't think when I was younger I was able to beat it. In fact, I think I finally did beat it maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I finally did sit down and play the game again and beat it, after much frustration, of course. Now, being Halloween and all, I might be tempted to pick it up and try and beat it again. I have, of course, played it since then, just not all the way through. It's probably not going to be considered the most hardcore hard game, but it was a hardcore horror game on the NES, and that's what made it unique. And that's why it stands out to people like Metroid, like Mario, like Mega Man. It's because it was unique. It had its own unique style to it. It had its own unique look. It wasn't just trying to rip off another game with a horror aspect to it. And it didn't really pull its punches. There were skulls in there. There were zombies in there. It had frightening images. And you know, when you were 6 or 7 years old playing this game, that was actually pretty frightening, believe it or not. Yes, looking back at an 8-bit game now, you probably don't find anything frightening on there. And of course, a lot of Castlevania fans are very much jaded, so going back to the original Castlevania, they probably won't find it as much of a challenge, or maybe they will, but they won't get the same experience out of it as they did when they originally played it, because since then graphics have improved. I mean, the graphics improved in Castlevania 2 and 3. In fact, they even changed many elements to it. A lot of fans actually prefer the sequel or the third one. Well, it all depends. A lot of people either hate the sequel, love the third one, or they love the sequel, hate the third one, or love the first one, hate the sequel and the third one, or whatever. You know what it is. It's a whole mixed bag. But I'm saying the first one is what started it all. So next time you're playing a game like Silent Hill or Resident Evil or Fear, you have to stop and think, what was one of the inspirations for these games? You know, you honestly wouldn't think Castlevania, but now you will, because it probably was. If it wouldn't have come first, there probably wouldn't have been, at least for a long time, a game similar to it or like it for quite a while, because it broke down that barrier and made it okay to make a horror movie themed video game. You got what you paid for. You got Frankenstein. You got the Mummy. You got Medusa. You got Igor. You got monsters galore. And of course, on the very end of it all, you got Dracula. And that's what you paid for. You were Belmont. You were a monster fighter. You were a monster hunter. You had all those weapons at your disposal. You had a whip by your side, and you had your wits among you, and you have to get rid of this plague of horror and indecency that is plaguing this land and destroying its people. And that's what you were doing. It put you in that world, and it never let you go until the very end, or at least until they killed you enough times. Well, I hope you enjoyed the special Halloween edition of Retro Gamer Ranting. As always, I want to hear back from you, so please leave a comment and subscribe if you like it. So please keep listening. I'll have many more where this came from. Until next time, game fans, this is Twitch. Keep playing.
Happy Halloween, everybody.